Chapter 5 Lords of the Void. Part 1 Through the Breathing Stone. The silence wasn't silent anymore. It pulsed. It breathed. It whispered. Amuro stood on the threshold of the lower catacombs, where the air was thinner, colder, but alive with something deeper than sound, intention. His rune glowed faintly, reacting to the very stones beneath his feet, as if the dungeon had become aware of his presence and was listening. Walls here were different. Not carved, but grown. They curved unnaturally, as though following the spiraling blueprint of something long dead and half-remembered. Every surface was etched with faint glyphs, but none he recognized, language worn away not by time, but by deliberate erasure. He paused. The light of his rune flared for a moment, then dimmed again. Something ahead. Moving. Watching. And then, a whisper in a tongue not meant for air. He bears the fracture. Let him descend. Let the marrow feed. Amuro clenched his jaw and pressed on. Hammer and wrench, survival begins. Crafting, rest and recovery. The descent had been long, and the last battle had left him bleeding, mentally frayed. When he found a small hollow in the stone, a chamber untouched by corruption, he dropped his pack with a sigh. It was time to regroup. He laid out what few supplies he had left, a flask of mineral-rich water gathered from dripping stone, 2 dried root bundles wrapped in leather, and fragments of a metallic fungus he'd harvested from a shimmering wall earlier. From the bones of the parasite he'd slain, he'd fashioned crude darts tipped with the remaining ichor. Toxic, but unstable. One hit would confuse or paralyze, if it didn't eat through his own skin first. He built a fire. Not with flame, but with rune heat, channeling a pulse from the mark on his palm into dried roots and binding them with ash. The glow was faint, but warm enough. He rested, and he dreamed. Of a throne of black bone. Of stars drowning in ink. Of someone else wearing his skin. Waxing crescent moon, the first encounter with Zane. He awoke to the sound of a blade unsheathing. Not his. Amuro sat up fast, grabbing the revenant blade, but a voice stopped him cold. If I wanted you dead, you'd still be dreaming. A man stood at the edge of the chamber. Cloaked in midnight leather, armor stitched with silver thread. His hair was short, uneven, like it had been burned off. One eye glowed softly green, the other was covered with a band of cracked metal. Zane. Name's Zane, the stranger said. Been watching you since the cathedral. You followed me? No, Zane replied. I remembered you. Amuro frowned. From where? Zane just smiled, and dropped a pouch at his feet. Inside were dried flesh strips, a folded rune map, and a vial filled with black mercury-like fluid. You're not the first to be chosen, Amuro. But you might be the last. Chapter 5 Lords of the Void. Part 2 Between the Fractures. Zane sat across from him now, back to the pulsating wall, calmly chewing one of the dried flesh strips he'd brought. Who are you really? Amuro finally asked, voice low. Zane didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled out a small shard of obsidian glass, held it up to the rune glowing faintly on Amuro's hand. The shard cracked. You're accelerating, Zane muttered. Faster than any of the others. Amuro narrowed his eyes. Others? There were 12 before you. Thread-marked, touched by the rune depth. You all shared the dream. Most went mad. One became a god. And one, he looked at Amuro, became me. Amuro stared. The firelight cast jagged shadows across Zane's face, and for a moment, something moved behind his left eye. A glimmer of violet. Echo light. Why are you helping me? Zane leaned in. Because this place doesn't want you dead. It wants you changed. And I want to see what happens when someone fights back. Compass location unlocked. The fracture field. They traveled together for a time, deeper than Amuro had gone before. The dungeon narrowed into a spindled corridor, like walking through the veins of a sleeping giant. Eventually, the corridor opened. What lay beyond defied geometry. A vast, open chamber, lit by no sun, yet casting shadows. Pillars floated mid-air. Walkways snapped into place only as they stepped forward. Echoes danced across the air like memory butterflies, trailing whispers in dozens of languages. In the center of the field, suspended above a pit with no bottom, hovered a pulsating sphere of broken crystal, the fracture core. Zane explained. This is where the threads collapse. The rules, time, thought, memory, they all bleed here. That's why we hunt. This is where Echo Lords feed. Manzombi new enemy. Echo-born wretches. They didn't have to wait long. From the broken edges of the field, things began to form. Bodies. Twisted. Misremembered. Like someone had tried to rebuild humans from fragments of memory but had forgotten what bones were. Their limbs were too long. Heads too flat. Joints bent the wrong way, and mouths hung open with no sound. Zane tossed Amuro a small silver disc. Rune bomb. Charges with your blood. 2 seconds to throw. Too late. The first wretch lunged. Amuro ducked, slashing the revenant blade upward. The blade met flesh, but didn't cut. Instead, the creature's memory was severed. It staggered, confused, forgetting it was alive. Zane shouted. They don't die unless they're unremembered. Cut deep. Cut real. Amuro moved fast. Used shadow rip step to blink behind one. Struck hard into its spine. The rune flared. A ripple tore through the field. 5 more came. Zane fought like a ghost, weaving between strikes, every blade motion laced with echo energy. They held for what felt like hours. Finally, silence. The field trembled. And the fracture core pulsed once, sending out a low drumbeat. Crystal ball, new trait gained, fracture sense. You are now sensitive to spatial anomalies and memory scars. Fracture sense allows you to detect false geometry, echo traps, and unrevealed echo signatures. Warning, side effect, possible dissociation in unstable zones. Amuro collapsed to one knee. His head burned. Zane caught him. You're sinking faster than I thought, he said quietly. You're almost ready. Amuro coughed, blood flecking his lips. Ready for what? Zane looked toward the horizon, where an impossible stairwell now spiraled upward from the void. For the Lord who waits. Chapter 5. Lords of the Void. Part 3. The Spiral that Watches. They climbed in silence. The staircase that stretched above the fracture field didn't feel real. Every step felt different, some soft like flesh, others brittle like old glass. No railings. Just open void yawning beside them, filled with the sound of nothing remembering itself. Zane finally broke the silence. The spiral wasn't built. It was shed. Amuro glanced at him. Shed. From the first Echo Lord. When it fell. This is what it left behind. Its spine. The idea lodged itself uncomfortably in Amuro's mind. That what they were walking on had once lived. That perhaps it still did. After several hundred steps, the air grew colder. Not just in temperature, but in emotion. Each breath was heavier, laced with a strange melancholy. Amuro felt watched, not by eyes, but by ideas. Then the spiral split. 2 paths diverged, one narrow and steep, winding up into light, the other wide and slick with dark liquid, descending slightly toward a door embedded in the void. Amuro turned to Zane. Let me guess. I have to choose. Zane smiled. You're starting to catch on. New Moon side path, Hall of Broken Hours, optional echo dive. Amuro took the wider path. As he approached the door, his rune pulsed, not warning but inviting. The door opened on its own. Inside, a small circular chamber made entirely of mirrors. In the center, a child. No older than 9. Sitting cross-legged, staring at Amuro with his own eyes. You left me, the child whispered. When the fire started. You ran. Amuro froze. The mirrors flickered, showing the memory. A house. Burning. Screams. A woman crying. A boy alone. Echo dive. Accept or reject. He chose, accept. Suddenly, he was there, reliving the moment. Every sensation, the heat, the smoke, the terror, hit him like a wave. But something was off. The fire spoke. It whispered in the voice of the revenant blade. Let me burn what you cannot face. When Amuro awoke, he was back in the chamber. The child was gone. The mirrors cracked. On the floor, a single black feather, humming with echo energy. Nazar Amulet new skill unlocked. Memory bind. Temporarily trap enemies in a loop of their strongest memory. High mental resistance required. Cooldown, long. He returned to the main spiral. Zane raised an eyebrow. You dived. Amuro didn't answer. They continued. Cloud, upper spiral. Reality shift storm. Near the top, the air shimmered like heat haze. Lightning, but made a voice, cracked across the void. The stairway bent sideways, twisting against gravity. Zane crouched and stabbed a crystal into the stone. Storms thick. Echo event. Reality is thin here. Stay close. Shapes swirled in the mist. Not enemies. Possibilities. One version of Amuro walked past them, older, armored in bone, his rune blackened. Another, headless, twitching. A third, Amuro, but female, carrying a sword made of living blood. Zane ignored them. Don't touch them. Why? Amuro asked. Zane didn't answer. One of the variants turned suddenly and screamed. The spiral exploded in feedback. Glass shards of time cut through them. Zane collapsed. Amuro's rune flared instinctively. Skill triggered. Echo siphon, passive defense. He absorbed part of the scream. It hurt, but it stabilized him. He crawled to Zane. Move, he shouted. Zane opened one eye. They're not supposed to notice us. Crossed swords, mini-boss encounter. Possibility Reaver. From the storm stepped a single figure. Amuro's face. But twisted. Burned. Scarred. Its voice layered, male and female, young and old. I am all the things you didn't become. And I'm here to take your place. The fight was chaos. The Reaver mimicked his every move. Shadow rip step. Countered. Revenant blade. Reflected. But it lacked memory. That was the key. Amuro triggered memory bind, locking the Reaver into its own worst echo. It shrieked as it relived every choice never made. That gave him the opening. One deep strike. A final echo crack. And it was gone. Zane stood slowly. You're getting dangerous, he said. Amuro stared at the fading Reaver. That was me. No, Zane replied. That was who the dungeon wanted you to be. They reached the top. Before them, a massive gate, blacker than space itself. Etched in it, in echo runes. Lords of the Void. Entry restricted. Zane drew his dagger. We rest here. Past that door is no longer dungeon. It's domain. Amuro exhaled, lowering his blade. The rune on his arm was almost singing now. And somewhere beyond that door, something ancient waited. Watching. Smiling. Cyclone to be continued in Chapter 6, The Crownless Sleep. Chapter 5, Lords of the Void. Final segment, between what was and what may be. The two of them sat in silence near the threshold of the obsidian gate. Zane was sharpening his dagger out of habit more than necessity. Sparks jumped with each stroke. Amuro sat with his back against a cracked pillar, sipping lukewarm liquid from a metal flask he'd conjured through one of the rune-etched forges hidden along the spiral. So, Zane muttered, not looking up, you faced yourself. Amuro exhaled, steam curling from his breath. Not myself. A version. One the dungeon tried to use against me. Zane nodded slowly. That's what it does. It doesn't invent nightmares. It recalls them. Shapes them. Gives them teeth. Is that what happened to you? Amuro asked, watching him. Zane paused, just a moment too long. Then, no. What happened to me was my own doing. The dungeon just made sure I remembered. Amuro studied him. What did you leave behind? Zane's eyes flickered violet for a moment, reflecting the runes. Too much. And not enough. A long pause. Then Amuro asked quietly, do you ever think we're not real anymore? Zane laughed, a short, broken sound. I hope we're not. They fell back into silence. Above them, the gate pulsed with unseen energy, each beat syncing with the hum of Amuro's arm rune. A call. A threat. A promise. Zane finally sheathed his dagger. We sleep in turns. Eat if you can. After this gate, it's not floors or bosses anymore. It's them. Amuro looked up at the swirling dark above. The Lords of the Void. Zane stood. One of them used to be human. Amuro raised an eyebrow. Used to be. Zane turned, expression unreadable. Used to be, like you. And with that, he walked into the shadow beneath the gate, vanishing from view. Amuro sat a moment longer. His rune whispered across his skin. Not in fear, but in anticipation. Cyclone. End of Chapter 5.